Newsana.com, we're a relatively young startup. I appreciate all of the members of Newsana that are here tonight. Thank you very much for your participation. For all those who might be new to Newsana, we welcome all of you. Newsana.com. We'll get more into that later. It's not often that we find our oft-ignored city making headlines around the world. It's even less often that the key players who made this story happen are sitting together on the same stage. I'd like to introduce the panel as follows. Michael Cook, editor of the Toronto Star, the man at the helm of the newspaper that broke the story wide open. Robin Doolittle, City Hall reporter at the Toronto Star, one of the only people that has actually seen the most famous Canadian movie of all time. Greg MacArthur, national reporter at the Globe and Mail. Greg's stellar reporting unearths the dodgy drug-dealing past of Doug Ford. This is the second time Greg has found himself in the middle of a huge political scandal. Greg re-broke the Mulrooney Airbus scandal a few years ago. Or however you want to define it. Andrew Coyne, columnist of the National Post, member of the Ad Issue panel on CBC, and one of Canada's great political commentators.
The Star, we've endured about $500,000 worth of lost business and subscriptions from Ford Nation, and Ford himself, the two brothers themselves, with their cotton candy, disgraceful radio show on CFRB, urged everybody who would listen to them to cancel their business with the Star. That has stopped now. But we endured that for months and months and months. And Robin herself and everybody connected with her was called maggots and lies, etc., etc. So it was a long process.
There have been breadcrumbs about the mayor's problems all over the internet for years. Certainly I was on the police beat before moving to City Hall, and I covered the domestic incident. And yeah, certainly about a year in, you know, you see weekly updates on Twitter of him buying Mickeys of vodka at LCBOs, and there's these pictures of him kind of drunkenly, well, you didn't know drunkenly, but sweaty and kind of with his face all smushed up next to women that are appearing online, and you hear things from his staff about why he's not there, and you kind of get an inkling of what is going on. The crack videos got so much attention, but the Garrison Ball story is really the thing that I'm most proud of that I've done in my career so far. You know, at the time it was quite a bombshell to say the mayor is struggling with alcohol, and a lot of focus is on the military ball, but actually to me the most important thing in that story is that several members of his staff were saying the mayor needs to go to rehab. And who were they telling this to? The Toronto Star, because they were hoping that it would sort of embarrass him into getting help. And to actually see the video, it just makes your heart stop a little bit. And you're kind of all in the same situation that I was in at the time, which is I'd heard what was on the tape. I was expecting to see it. But when you all eventually get a chance to see it, it will also stop your heart. It's something to see. Not to brag or anything.
Our story started in August of 2011, and I found myself really curious about the mayor. And at that time, it's funny, my entry was sparked by what seemed like some pretty minor things right now, like his fight with Margaret Atwood, and he was in the news all the time, but not for the reasons we know him today. And so I pitched a profile of Rob Ford as a young man, and I'd never really covered municipal politics, and I'd spent no time at City Hall, but I just found myself really curious. And so, the co-author of the piece, Shannon, had pitched the same story at the same time, and we ended up going out to Etobicoke and just building a database of names of people who knew him, and before long we found ourselves interviewing someone in the Royal York Plaza who said they used to buy pot from the mayor, from Rob Ford. And so that got us kind of intrigued, but it seemed like not a huge detail at the time. It was a small amount, and we thought, well, maybe that's part of the story, but let's look into it and find out if there's more to it. And that person led us to someone else, who led us to someone else, who informed us that no, that Robbie was small-time Doug and Randy dealers, and that person led us to another person who kind of laid out the whole roadmap for us about the situation in Etobicoke and who was dealing to who and who was supplying, the extent to which they were involved in this.
I come across this again and again in this country in particular, but I think in societies in general. It's very hard for the public to form reasoned judgments about these things, particularly when you're talking about public figures, when you're talking about politicians in particular. Now, I'm going to say something a little bit nastier, but politicians in general, successful ones, are pretty good at manipulating people's emotions, and pretty good at appealing to your best or your worst instincts, but it's always about them ultimately. If and they can use that talent for good if they want to, many of them do. But if they in fact are people who are up to no good, and they also have those skills, they're very good at muddling people's ability to think this through, and they appeal to all these decent instincts we have of who are we to judge? You know, nobody wants to be a moralist, or the presumption of innocence. Well, the presumption of innocence is a legal concept about not convicting somebody and throwing them in jail. It doesn't require us all to be deaf, dumb, and stupid. And yet what it does is it plays upon that, where we can't look at facts that are in front of us and form reasoned inferences. So in the Globe's case, they had 10 witnesses. You know, typically if you get 2 witnesses, you can go with the Star. They got 10. In the Star's thing, as if the Star was going to commit its entire good name and the names of the people involved in this to a fiction, to a fraud. And yet people wanted to kind of withhold judgment, and that's what Ford and in other scandals other people have been able to play upon. I mean, Greg was very much involved with the Maroney story, and people kept wanting to suspend judgment, even when stuff was staring you in the face. So this is a real difficulty we have as a democracy if people, because we lack in this country the kind of institutional mechanisms, as we're certainly finding out with the mayor, to hold people to account.
One thing that I'm really interested in moving forward is where the public is sitting right now in terms of their trust in the media. That one poll, I can speak for myself, I was quite surprised, I want to say almost slightly devastated in the summer when polls showed that 45% of the city didn't just have questions about the accuracy of the story, 45% of the polls thought this was a hoax.
It's like living in an HBO show. Like it's like, and everyone, and the audience is actively engaged. They're sending tips in through Twitter, and photos and that sort of thing. It's like no story I've ever worked on.
And that's what's really cool. I live around Parkdale, and of course everyone's all hopped up in that area all about this. And everywhere I go, people recognize me on the street, which is odd because it's like just basically from Twitter. But I hear people talking about Fabio Basso, and I'm like, why are we talking about Fabio Basso? It's brunch. Like, I don't get it. But yeah, it's amazing.
Look, the really annoying thing about that Gawker story is that it was fantastic. I don't want social media or websites like Gawker to be accurate. I want mainstream media to be the only place you can go to be absolutely sure that you're getting pretty much the best journalism you can get. The problem with the Gawker story written by John Cook is it was terrific. There was no reason we didn't get into the game of buying the first video, and this is not a new thing I'm telling you, is that we could not give money to drug dealers who might buy drugs or guns with it. We just could not do that. What we thought about doing, and in the end we decided not to, is maybe we could deal with the leaders of the Somali and Canadian community in that district, and maybe we could persuade them to get the video, and we could make a donation to the community and build a basketball court or swings and slides or some education or something, so that in the end we could say, hand on heart, truthfully, that some good has come out of bad. In the end we never did that. You can purchase an object, or you can purchase a movie, a video, a photograph, but you can't purchase information. And I think there's a big, big difference between the two. TV stations, I'm getting some bad body language here from here.
Just think about it.
TV stations routinely, and newspapers more and more, pay for video taken by regular folks.
So I've gone back and read every single thing that's ever been written about Rob Ford, and I can tell you that no one uses Rob Ford's family more than Rob Ford. Every single time he has ever had an issue, he brings his children out. It started with the domestic assault in 2008. He brought his 3-year-old daughter out on his hip to speak to reporters and said, "Can you say no comment?" When I reported on his domestic assaults at more domestic assaults at his house in 2011, he went to Florida and sent the Toronto Sun a photo of him and his 2 children in the pool. Sarah Thompson accuses the mayor of grabbing her ass, accuses him of using cocaine. He brings his kids into City Hall with him and then walks them out the door in front of him, as if daring reporters ask me about cocaine in front of my children.
Again, the test, it seems to me, is this something that would help a fair-minded reader form a judgment about this public figure's character? Lots of what we're finding out about the private life of Rob Ford is telling us a great deal about his character and, in fact, his fitness to govern. And to me, where this becomes really disturbing is in one of the most recent stories in the Star, which was, of course, about the multiple visits of uniformed police officers to the Ford household on quote-unquote domestic assault incidents. And even more disturbing is the fact that it seems like people were kind of covering for him and not taking this any further. But the longer that's gone on, and the kind of fanatical loyalty that they have encouraged in the community, the whole rhetoric and narrative of any criticism of him is just because he wants to cut your taxes. The only people who are down on him are people who want to keep the gravy train going. It's just those people downtown who don't like you people out in the suburbs. It's just those snobs who are looking down at you less educated people.
Like the chief of police.
This whole storyline, well, like eventually the Toronto Sun and Jason Kenney and all these other people who have perhaps belatedly but have spoken out against him. But that narrative and that us and them mentality, and look, lots of people in the downtown are very snobby about the suburbs, so I'm not saying this is all made up out of whole cloth. There's a reason for some of these resentments. But people can choose to either bridge those divides or widen them, and the people around Ford and that type of populism have very deliberately chosen to widen them, and it's made it very difficult to again, as a community, to form reasoned judgments about important matters.
Andrew, you penned a piece recently where you urged the mayor to get out and not get help. Is that a bit harsh? Like, should the mayor not be allowed a chance at rehabilitation, a chance to say,
If the issue were just his difficulties with alcohol or even drugs, if it was just one of those conventional things, as Michael was saying, maybe. When it's coupled with just massive lying on a grand scale, one time after another, it's just oftentimes where these things really get nasty. It's anybody can mess up, and anybody can, in some cases, even lie. It's when you're finally caught that you really test, because the really devious person then spends the next 6 months, 9 months, or a year twisting our whole ability to figure out whether they were caught or not.
If the city re-elects Rob Ford, maybe then there will be a discussion about what's going on up in Toronto. Not that I pass any judgment if anyone wants to elect Rob Ford. Do what you got to do. But yeah, I mean, right now it's the city still humming along, and I don't know if people really think that something bad's happening up here.
I don't think anybody thinks we're a bunch of crackheads up there, but I do think they think we're maybe a little dysfunctional in our civic institutions.
it seems like since the crack video allegations first came to light, Rob Ford's behavior has been getting more and more erratic.
Or at News Talk 1010, we were there for their last radio show, and I happened to be there with a bunch of reporters. And we were crazy people running through the garage trying to get a picture of him at the end because he wasn't going to talk to us. And I have video of it on my phone. It's pretty funny, actually. And I was texting with one of his staff members. I'm like, this does not look good on us. And he's like, I know.
And for that reason, do you think that all the media outlets should agree to stop sending reporters to his driveway?
No, but here's what they should stop doing. Waiting outside that elevator at City Hall, and when the doors open, he comes out and 19 people all shout 19 different questions and keep shouting. That serves nothing except theater.
Yeah.
And we look stupid.
Yeah, I agree with that. The people love the guy who takes a licking and just keeps on ticking and won't give up. He taps into a lot of things in our psyche. So if we think, in a crowded field where you only have to get 30% or whatever to win, we're kidding ourselves if we don't think he can do it.
And he's got 20. There are 20% of the city, pretty much, they're, no matter what happens, are going to vote for Rob Ford. I think that man will run. If he might run from jail if he gets arrested. I'm not even joking, although that was funny. But I think he'll run regardless. So he won't wear any of the negative tax increases. He's going to say he built a subway. He would have hired more cops. He would have repealed the land transfer tax, but the lefties took over again.
So there are a number of people who are watching from home or wherever they may be on their computers or cell phones or tablets, and I hear that there's a bunch of questions from them. So I'd like to start a little. Are there other questions from the audience?
And, I'm from Calgary. I came to see this today.
Wow, really?
Welcome to Crazy Town.
And, but there's a reason I've been following it, and I've been following it from another perspective. And I'll key on something that Mr. Cook said, particularly referencing you would not buy a film, but you would do something for the Somali community. And you would put up some swings or do something of that nature, or maybe a library or a basketball court. And I think that points to, and I'm not going to take anything away from you here, but a very odd connection to what I think is the bottom of the iceberg. I think if Rob's up here, the iceberg is the relationship of Canada and the Somali diaspora. Living in Alberta, I believe last month was the 43rd Somali youth murdered in the Edmonton, the oil town area. Fort McMurray. That corridor, including the Greyhound station in Edmonton all the way up to Fort McMurray, there's been 42 unsolved murders of Somali youth. This has been back for the last 3.5, 4 years. So it comes all the way up to and connects to this story.
There is a problem, as you say, with some Somali youth who are involved with the drug trade, and that is, I think, it does coincide with this. I'm not sure I would then extend it back to Canada and the Somali community as a general, but the specific problem of drug gangs is obviously an issue.
3 months of itineraries from 2011 or 2012 to 3 months of itineraries in 2011 or 10, and you know what I'm trying to say here, and that it's definitive that he has drastically cut his workload. I hear all the time now from people saying, you know, maybe you guys should have reported on this stuff before you got elected, which I think is, again, it's the flip side. It's either we're too hard or too soft, and we just kind of report on news stories. And if the fact that the mayor might be smoking crack is not a news story, or might have a drinking problem is not a news story, or not showing up for work is not a news story, or possibly getting in, you know, altercations with football players and being asked to remove, not allowed to coach children football, I mean, that's a news story, and I think that we've shown that.
Let me just, it might help if my own sort of evolution on this. 3 years ago, during in the run-up to the election, the Star ran a series of very critical stories revealing aspects of the mayor's misbehavior on various fronts. And I remember reading them and not being as shocked as the Star was. So I would read, for example, that he had shaken a football player roughly, and I thought, well, okay, then you probably shouldn't do that. But what I was really reading was, oh, but he coaches football. That's a pretty good thing to do. And I had a coach who probably yelled at us too much, and so I kind of rationalized it. And then there was a story about how he'd offered to buy drugs for a homeless guy, and I thought, well, he shouldn't have done that. But well, on the other hand, I probably would have just told the guy to get lost, and that was kind of almost generous of him, So I was rationalizing. Okay, so if you looked at that in isolation, you would say, yeah, the Star cried wolf, and because you did so many of these things, then he was able to get off on this crap. But if you look at it really, though, in hindsight, you say, the Star was right and I was wrong. The Star was on him early. The Star knew the context. The Star knew the breadcrumbs. The Star knew that these were not just stories in isolation. That the guy was a walking train wreck.
If there's one thing that motivates most journalists, it's when they're being misled. And the Fords continue to say things that are demonstrably false. And when they do that, it's almost like a challenge to reporters. You're kind of saying to them, I think you're either too lazy or too stupid to go and check out what the truth is. So you go and check out what the truth is, and it doesn't add up.
And of course, the final thing they rely on is it's just the sheer multiplicity of events. So he's done so many things that are so crazy and so wrong, and there's so many aspects of them and so many stories. And then after you've reported all of them, then they say, this is a big pile-on. What do you do with that? That means you shouldn't have reported all this stuff, all these things that I did wrong, because that's piling on. So it's just one of the many tricks he's got in his bag to try and confuse people.
Well, I can say that when the Toronto Star is ready to publish information, we would bring that information to you.
At Newsana?
At Newsana, cue the tape.
And I want to thank again and urge all of you to check out newsana.com. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
thank you.
I thought it was good. I love Andrew Coyne, so it was really fun to kind of hear his perspective on all of this, and it's nice to share the stage with Greg MacArthur as well, and of course my boss.
Right, and what about your book that's coming out? What's that going to be?
It's about Rob Ford. I mean, it's the Rob Ford story, so my hope is to really explain why he is the way he is, kind of the history of him and the things that have happened to shape him, and kind of give some warning of what's been happening now. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Toronto Truth Seekers.
Okay.
I've been working on a documentary, and one of the characters in it, Toge Tote.
I think I watched an interview that you guys did with him.
Yeah.
We're gonna go swank, so we'll walk down here and.
I'm stealing him.
I think no. I think this guy waited briefly. He wants to do this. I don't want to. Okay.
Just a few questions. Do you mind introducing yourself?
So my name's Greg MacArthur. I'm a reporter with the Globe and Mail.
How did you think about the event?
I thought it was great. It's fun. It's fun to get together with the journalists from the other papers actually on this story. One interesting thing, it's been a really competitive story, but at the same time I think there's a lot of camaraderie because we all kind of recognize that there's sort of a hidden truth out there and that we're all in pursuit of the same thing, and that the competition on the story has in fact produced better journalism because we're all sort of pushing each other.
Maybe. I don't know.
The RY Drifters is sort of a loose association of young people that hung out in Etobicoke in the late 70s and early 80s. It was sort of a loose group of kids that were involved in some serious heavy drugs, and there was a lot of excess drug abuse in a community amongst young people, more than I would have expected to have found. Some serious hard drugs like heroin, and it was a group of kids that hung out at a plaza where those drugs were sold, and the name of the group was after the plaza. The plaza was once known as the Drift, and they became the RY Drifters.
Yeah, great. All right, thanks a lot, Greg.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I missed your name again.
It's Daniel. I'm with Toronto Truth Seekers.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. It was nice. If you're talking to, I can always never.